Okay, so it has been some time since Destiny Revenant Act 1 has come out, and I wanted to make this video pretty much after the dungeon was released because I didn't want to give an accurate kind of analyzation of what I think of this episode before seeing the dungeon, because usually the dungeon is quite a large chunk of content, and honestly, I am so glad that I did that. And the TLDR is that I love this episode. And there's so much that I want to talk about in this video, just to kind of emphasize on that very small TLDR. And it all starts with the direction of where Bungie's going and the structure of this episode and the lore. And the lore is going to be such a huge part of this video as well. And for those of you who don't know me, I love the lore so much. I've been studying the lore for over 10 years now. The Ishtar Collective, there isn't a lore book I haven't read. There isn't a Grimoire card I haven't read. I delve deep into this sort of stuff, and I do like to make that relevant when I start to talk about the lore at the beginning of these videos, because I don't have a big following like what Bive does or like Mylan Game does, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I know any less. So with that in mind, let us continue, because this, oh my god, what an absolute banger. So the format of this is different in a way that Bungie released all their content for the act immediately. And honestly, I thought that that was a really good idea, because I actually find myself playing the game more now with all the content released than I did when the content was split over. You know, before I would just log in every Tuesday, do what I needed to do, and get out. Now I'm playing the game every single day again with the lads, with Max, with Logan, and it feels absolutely incredible. I love the structure. I think it's really, really good. I think the opening cutscene was insane as well, because the helm got smashed into. I love the fact that Aramis is involved. I love the fact that we're fighting alongside her with House Salvation, and there's a lot of lore behind that, which I'll dive into later into this video. There's just a lot there, and Bungie, so far, 10 out of 10. But what does that 10 out of 10 look like? So, first of all, we finally get to go to the last city. We finally have the last city as a destination, and if you guys don't remember the location of this particular area in the last city, the last time we were here was in Season of Arrivals. That is how long it has been, and it's actually insane to see what it, remember what it was back then to what it is right now, because now it's flourished. Now there's life. We are the cause of the reason why there's so much architecture and life in this area now, and just to see that development in terms of like a lore perspective, I think it's so cool. And we've got all our fan favorite Elixnis there as well. You've got Ido, you've got Spider, you've got Aramis locked up, and you've got good old Mithrax. And Mithrax isn't doing too good, is he? And we'll touch upon that later in the video as well. So one of the complaints that I saw immediately when it comes to this episode was the fact that there is just not enough content in the game when it comes to story beats. And honestly, after seeing the dungeon, I could not disagree more. And the thing is what you have to understand is Destiny is such a huge game. It's massive. Just because we have tiny little story beats in these episodes doesn't necessarily mean that the actual story itself is small, because that's absolutely not the case. Sometimes you do have to read between the lines, and that is actually why I wanted to make this video after the dungeon's release, because it all kind of ties in together into one big beautiful bow, and it works. So what do we know so far? So Thickrel is the main enemy of this episode. He has come to the realization that Odransov is no more and that there is only Crow, and he goes on a absolute rampage. So he crashes into the helm. The helm is now under construction near the tower, which is going to take longer than 6 years because we're still waiting for the D1 tower to get fixed. You can see that going on in the background still. And we are now in the last city. Thickrel is running rampage. He has now figured out a way of how he can turn the Fallen into Scorn whilst they're alive, which is huge, by the way, because in lore, before this episode, the only time the Scorn were created were from dead Fallen. They were basically zombies, but not anymore. Vicar has figured out a way of how he can reanimate them and mutate their flesh and bones whilst the Fallen are alive and turn them into Scorn, which give them kind of a new feel, a new vibe, which really does show and really does come across in the Onslaught activity. And by the way, if there's any Gambit veterans, the Onslaught map that you get in that kind of Tangled Shore Scorn area, that was actually an old Gambit map that they've repurposed and brought back for Onslaught, and it works really, really well. They did a really good job with making that kind of fit in. But yeah, the Scorn are back. They're different, they're meaner, and they have a whole new, brand new feel, because you're shooting a live Elixni. Sure, they might not be a live Elixni anymore in terms of its brain, but they were at one point almost seconds ago before he started shooting them. So Fickrell's on a rampage. He's now got an echo as well. And keep in mind, Fickrell can also not die. He keeps coming back to life, which is why the strike, where you have to keep on, going through the strike to kill Fickrell, in the lore, that actually does make sense. The Vanguard want to keep Fickrell under control, and the way that they do that is they rotate a group of fire teams to go into that strike and constantly kill Fickrell because he keeps coming back. And the Vanguard are basically saying, if you guys keep doing that, we're able to keep him under check. But obviously that's not the case now, because he's out and he is on an absolute rampage. Furthermore from that, we have a little bit of a side story going on as well, because when we got to the last city, we saw that Mithrax is hooked up to a servitor. And that servitor was rearranged and changed medically by Ido, because Mithrax has a little secret around his neck, which some of you might not know about, which was a huge part of the Nezarec lore. He has a curse, and this curse was given to him because Mithrax infiltrated the lunar pyramid, which was Nezarec's pyramid, and basically ripped apart his body and put his body into all these different vials and pots, right? But he kept one part for himself. I think it was like a finger or a thumb or something like that, and he put it on a necklace and he put it around his neck, and he is now slowly dying, to put it bluntly. Mithrax is dying, and the curse is withering away at him more and more and more as each day passes. And the reason why we see him hooked up to the servitor at the beginning of the mission is because Ido is trying to protect him or find some form of medication in order to cure the curse, and it is not happening. Every single time you have a conversation with Mithrax now, his sentences always end with this kind of mutated voice because Nezarec is coming out. Also, what's interesting is when you see Fickrell on the helm, he announces that he is the Kell of Kells, which in my opinion is not true. He's kind of claiming this title for himself based on old fallen Ishtar lore. And for those of you who don't know what the Kell of Kells is, the Kell of Kells is looked at as a god. You have all of these elixni from different houses. You've got House Judgment, you've got House of Devils, House Salvation, all of these different houses, right? And there's more than what I've just said. Like there's House Dusk as well, House of Kings, there's there too. Like they're all coming to my mind now. But the Kell of Kells are basically seen as this god, which are able to bring all of the houses together as one big collective. And it's also written in lore that the Kell of Kells is also the only fallen that is able to receive communication directly from the traveler. Like this being, this Kell of Kells is so mighty that not only can they unite all of the Elixni houses that all have very different judgments, but is also able to communicate and have a response from the travelers. This is like a huge deal, right? So Fickrell, that's a very basic version by the way before I continue. Fickrell is announcing himself as the Kell of Kells. The reason why I don't think that is true is because in the season where we were going around picking up the pots that have parts of Nezarec in them, we would get dialogue from Mithrax saying that he can feel the traveler reaching out to him. He can feel the traveler responding to him. And that is so key because there are other Elixni in the lore that have tried to accomplish the same thing and just haven't. So that huge part on its own already leans more towards the Mithrax is the Kell of Kells. Mithrax was also the one that formed House Light. He was the one that managed to convert other Elixni to join this house of good and righteousness so that they can live amongst the last people in the last city in peace. He brought a group of people together, a group of fallen together, and was able to harmonize that. At the beginning, it was very rocky and a few people didn't agree with it, like Saladin, for example, but he managed to move their mindsets around. And again, that's something that an Elixni has never done before, but Mithrax was able to accomplish that. But anyway, going back to the story beats of this current episode, Mithrax has a curse. He's got the necklace of Nezarec around his neck right now, and it is slowly consuming him, and it is slowly taking over. And I am fully convinced, based on the Ishtar Fallen lore, that Mithrax is actually the Kell of Kells, and he doesn't even realize it yet. So we've got Fickrell on a rampage, converting a live Fallen into Scorn, and then we've got this side story where Nezarec is just taking over the body of Mithrax. Also, a side note, I'm fairly confident that the voice actor of Mithrax is actually the same voice actor as Nezarec, so that kind of ties in together nicely too. But more as the story progresses, Mithrax is slowly becoming more corrupted and more cursed, and honestly, it's not looking too good. I don't know how this episode ends, but it does look like Mithrax is going to die, and either two things are going to happen. He dies and he stays dead, or he comes back as a guardian, and that actually is quite a high possibility because he's already had communication with the Traveler. But this also means that the continuational story of Nezarec gets to continue as well, because that raid boss that you fought, that wasn't the full form of Nezarec. No. Nezarec is a living nightmare. Think the Freddy Krueger of Destiny, right? He is out there. He is about. There's a reason why the people of Neomuna did not want to remain like living actually on the planet, and they uploaded themselves to the network because they were all constantly being haunted by Nezarec, and that was was their only escape. And we're seeing that happen again. Let's just say Mithrax comes back, and he comes back as a guardian after he dies at the end of this episode, which I'm assuming he does. What does that actually mean for the story? Well, that actually means quite a lot as well, because not only would it be the first fallen Elixni that wields the power of the light, but it also means he completely forgets his previous life. So the Mithrax that we know, that memory's dead. We've got a new guardian fallen now who won't remember anything. But that also means that Ido won't have a father, so she'll be looking at this figure which she sees as a dad, but he'll be looking at her thinking, who are you? So there's some huge story beats there which they can potentially go down, which would be absolutely insane to see unfold. But it also means the rise of Nezarec again, and hopefully we can get Nezarec in his old body, because his old body is so much better than this weird demented tormentor version that we see in the raid. But don't undermine Nezarec, because he is much stronger than what that raid lets on, and I think we're about to see that. So we've got this huge story point where Fickrell is on a rampage with Scorn in a completely reshaped form, literally going around causing havoc. By the way, literally in the first mission, Fickrell and the Scorn infiltrated New Reese, which is why Aramis is even willing to help us in the first place. And now we've got this whole thing with Mithrax and Nezarec. These are two huge story beats. So yeah, we may have a couple missions here and there may be some dialogue here and there, but the actual story and lore behind this episode so far is so rich, so deep, and so very incredible. And I am so happy that we got to experience that all in one go. And it doesn't stop there, because then we had a little dungeon called Vesper's Host, and oh my god, what a dungeon. So not only was the dungeon incredible from a mechanical point of view, it was so fun doing that on contest mode, but the lore behind it is absolutely insane. I won't touch too much on the lore of Vesper's Host, because you can watch another video for that, but I highly recommend that you do, because that thing that you see in the sky, which is all tangled up from those wires, that is not a portal. That is a communications relay where messages were constantly being put through, and eventually, when you get to the very end, something responds back. And let me tell you something right now. That thing that responds, that is not something that we have encountered in Destiny before. It is going back in rich lore. I'm confident that I know the answer, but I'm not going to throw anything out there. I want people to kind of discover it for themselves. Also, there are many theories and videos online that you can go and watch as well. But that lore is so deep and so rich that it honestly elevated this episode for me tenfold. You know, you've got Atrax, who might not actually be Atrax, because Atrax is being manipulated and warped and changed, and all these multiple copies of her just being distributed out, just like in the Deepstone Crypt raid. It also makes you wonder if the Atrax in the Deepstone Crypt is even the real one as well, or just another version of Atrax, which is such a high probability, because somewhere within the Deepstone Crypt is also an entire lab full of Atrax frames. It honestly just goes so rich. And then you've got the lore of the House Salvation Elixni that escaped Europa and didn't want to go to the last city and didn't want to be under the command of anyone else and wanted to just go explore and just be free and not have to listen to any rules or guidelines, and went to Vesper, which is the ship that we're on in the dungeon, because they wanted to just live a free life. And then they were able to figure out a way of how they could make unlimited ether from a servitor. And then as the story progressed, people started to go missing and voices started to be heard, and it's just a whole thing. I can't go too deep into this video right now, because I'll just be waffling on for ages and ages, but the lore of that dungeon is so insane, and it really is setting up such a huge story beat for the future, because something new is coming. Because I am telling you guys right now, that thing that responded back, that is not something that we've encountered before, and I am so excited to see if my theory of what I think that is correct, because that goes back to some deep lore which is not even in the game. You have to go reading to try and find that stuff out. Clovis has a lot to do with it. Vesper has a lot to do with it. Remnants of the Witnesses Past has a lot to do with it. And now the Fallen have just elevated that even more, because something is taking control of Atrax in this dungeon. It is not Atrax, it is something else greater, and there's a reason why those eyes are glowing pink. Anyway, I'm gonna leave that there and park that to the side, and we're gonna move on further with my overall review of this episode. So, touching upon the dungeon just a little bit more as well, is the fact that all of the lore gets uncovered through these lore tabs and messages that you can pick up throughout the dungeon, and a large part of that is the quest for Icebreaker's Catalyst, which is one of the most incredible long quests I have experienced since D1. And again, I'll elaborate on that in just a little bit more. But that quest requires you to go back and forth, run different parts of the dungeon, run mechanics of the dungeon over and over, then reverse the mechanics of the dungeon over and over, work out mathematics on how to progress the quest in different encounters of the dungeon. Oh man, that was so good. With the return of Icebreaker, by the way, and then the catalyst of how you get it, 10 out of 10, man. 10 out of 10. And the reason why I say that the Icebreaker catalyst and how you obtain it is 10 out of 10 is because for all my D1 veterans out there, do you guys remember when you had to stand on certain pipes to unlock Outbreak Prime in Destiny 1? Do you remember how annoying that was? Do you remember how insane it was to work out the mechanics and do these specific things just to unlock Outbreak Prime? Well, we just did something very similar to that to unlock the catalyst of Icebreaker, and it really did give me Destiny 1 vibes, and that felt so good. That felt so good, because I guarantee you now, there's a lot of people playing Destiny 2 that will quite happily go back to Destiny 1 just to get that Destiny 1 feel again. And I do feel like that exotic catalyst mission just hit the nail on the head with those vibes. So I have just went on a tangent without trying to not go too deep on my overall opinion of the episode. We've got major story beats, we've got huge lore points, we've got Nezarec, we've got the potential death of Mithrax, we've got Fickrell claiming to be the Cat of Kells when he's not, we've got new reimagined Scorn, we've got an unknown entity which in rich lore could potentially be found out if you really do look deep enough, and again you could go watch a video for that. We've also got Icebreaker that came back. We got an insane quest that came along with the Icebreaker Catalyst, which gave huge Destiny 1 vibes. And we also finally got the last city as well as a social space location. So for all of those people that said at the beginning of this episode that there really wasn't much to it, I really think you should reimagine that opinion, because there's a lot here. And there's a lot that I actually think Bungie did 10 out of 10 on. So yeah, honestly, I'm really excited to see where things go. I'm really excited to see where the narrative goes. And my channel isn't a lore channel. The lore that I know about Destiny and all of that rich kind of deep lore that goes back way back to Grimoire cards or Ishtar Collective, or just things that you have to real dig deep and look up and read and find out for yourself. That's stuff that I spent years doing. And I'm not a lore channel, which is why I don't delve too deep on it, but I do kind of know myself when it comes to the lore, and to see it go in this direction, I'm so excited. But yeah, let me know what your thoughts and opinions are in the comment section below. What is your opinions of the story? What do you think is communicating to us through the comms relay that was created by Clover Spray using Vex technology? Again, I didn't even talk about that in this video, actually, now that I think about it. Oh man, I'm not a lore channel. If you guys want to go see the lore stuff, go check out Myland Games, go check out My Name is Bife. But just remember something. Just because someone doesn't have a big following like what those guys does, it doesn't mean that they don't know anything about the lore. I've spent a decade of my life researching this stuff, and I'm so excited to see where this goes. Guys, leave a like on the video if you did enjoy watching. Like I said, leave your thoughts and opinions in the comment section below. I really am interested to see your take on this, and I will see you in whichever video I next make. See you later, lads.